Greetings and welcome, everybody. I wanted to take a minute to drop on because we are in the heart chakra with Venus right now. And the heart chakra is, of course, when we're working in the realm of the feminine, a very big chakra center. And I guess I wanted to speak a little bit about we're going into a holiday weekend in the States, and a lot of people will be visiting with family. And I felt inspired to talk a little bit about this kind of bridge between authenticity and belonging, what the aperture of our heart is, and how Venus in the astrology is kind of giving us an assist in a sense. So, one of the core wounds, let's say, of the feminine is the witch wound, right? And that often comes up when we're thinking about the throat chakra. However, the heart and the throat, or I mean, if we're being really honest, the entire chakra system, the Sushumna, right, the central channel, they all work together. The chakras stand on top of one another. And so, you know, um, in my own chart, I have Venus conjunct Mercury. Um, and what that kind of shows us, Mercury ruling the throat chakra, Venus the heart, is that like there's a way that I think as feminine women, we often want to intone our speech with love, right? We want to speak with love. We want to communicate with love. And while I think that that is a worthy endeavor, oftentimes when we're prioritizing love over the efficacy of the communication, we are watering down the communication, right? We are kind of like overlaying an affect to communicate something so that it's done with love, and then the message, if it's a harsh one, doesn't go in cleanly. You know, the the witch wound, it's bigger though than just the throat chakra. It's this idea of, being canceled or burned at the stake, um, for being ourselves, for being authentic. And I have to say, almost universally, the women that I work with, the women that are on the Venus path, one of the like universal themes that they are grappling with, I don't want to use the word struggle, but that they're grappling with is this kind of like tension between authenticity and belonging. And what's interesting is that we've had the nodal axis across Aries and Libra, which has really brought these themes to the fore. Whereas, Aries being ruled by Mars, being that sign of separation and being embedded with the divine spark, that essence of I am, right? I am. This is me. This is the essence of who I am, quintessentially me, right? And Libra being ruled by Venus, and this place where we find belonging, and that there is a tension that needs to be navigated. And I think in the spiritual world, we are so often met with themes of sovereignty, which is an extraordinarily important thing. I think that we sort of understand it, or it's been um, kind of merged into this idea of rugged individualism. Like there's this idea like that, this is me and I'm going to shove it down your throat, whether you like it or not. I'm going to always prize being authentic, or that's the goal somehow, that like we should never sacrifice our authenticity for belonging. But I don't know that that's actually true or realistic at all, right? And so I want to kind of address the nuances between these things, um, or between the two, and talk about how to navigate this tension. Um, the other thing I want to talk a little bit about is this idea of, you what the heart aperture really is, the aperture of the heart. I had a participant in Skydancer ask the other day, like, I feel like I live with a pretty open heart. Sometimes that feels problematic, but I mean, how open should my heart be? right? And of course, I directed her back to her own inquiry, right? And to play with it and to allow it to bump up against certain edges and see, like, it does it serve me to have my heart open here? But, even when we talk in the spiritual world about authenticity, or, like always being open and vulnerable, like, I don't know that that's always um the mandate either. When we think about the feminine and the feminine body, there's this way that, you know let's say I'm leaving the house, and I've got to go do entire slew of errands, and then in between I have, like a more intimate meeting, maybe I'm going to have coffee with a friend. There may be this way that how I navigate the world is like I have a sort of consumer mask that I put on while I am um, navigating between like a library drop off and a grocery store drop off, and things of that nature. And um and so I just sort of put this cloak on. It's like a cloak of invisibility in a way. It just allows me to go and do the things that I need to do without having my system super wide open and super permeable, right? And then I go and I have coffee or a date with a friend, and at that point I need to remember to take off these layers of invisibility, or my cloak, and become vulnerable and open-hearted at that moment. So I open the aperture of my heart chakra, and then I go on with my day. And then maybe, I have to meet with somebody in an adversarial sense, like, let's say I got a ticket and I want to go and see a judge. And so I put on my kind of like professional mask. All of those things are me, right? Like, I am me wearing the mask. I'm the one operating the mask, right? And so it's not so much about us always being authentic as it is it, or always being like vulnerable and open. It's about our level of consciousness around how we're operating, right? So as long as I'm conscious that I'm wearing a consumer mask, like I've done that consciously, as long as I'm consciously taking that off in moments where that mask is not of service, right? I'm not going into an intimate coffee date with a friend wearing a mask. I'm there, and I've taken a moment to switch gears, and I'm open-hearted, and I'm able to connect and have intimacy with her. So, I think these things are really important nuances that the spiritual community just it doesn't address well. There really is this idea that like we just always have to be authentic. However, there's also, a great fear around that. Like, it sounds really, really beautiful to be authentic. My own teacher has talked about having read a big study that talked about like the different levels of frequency, right? And they had asked participants prior to the study, what do you think the highest frequency is? And many people said, the highest frequency is love. And we come to find out that the highest frequency, the highest vibe you can be in is not love. It's authenticity, right? It's when you're able to express yourself authentically and to operate inside of your own unique gifts, right? But for so many people, there is a deep terror, right, inside of um, opening the aperture of their authenticity that wide, that big, to be being seen, right? Um, and that terror is part of the witch wound. I think it's part of an ancestrally encoded safety mechanism. But the shadow of that and all of these things kind of are housed in Libra, which is part of the heart chakra in my cosmology on the Venus path. Um, there was almost like a safety, a level of safety and need to survive at a certain point for women, where women really were so limited in the roles that they could um, inhabit and embody, and in the things that they could do and talk about, that there was a danger. I mean, we see this playing out today, like in Afghanistan, the Taliban, but there were um, very similar, not necessarily to that degree, but very similar types of dogmatic ideas around what women could do. It's interesting. I've been watching the show Outlander for years. I love that show. And in one of the episodes, because the main protagonist, Claire, is from the future. And in the future, she was able to go to Harvard and become a doctor in the 60s and 70s. But she goes back in time to the 1700s. And so she's got all of these healing abilities that nobody knows really where they came from. And so they exploit her for these abilities. They appreciate her. They all go to her to get help. But when she steps a foot out of line, she's accused of being a witch, which is crazy. But it really is. It's a great show that highlights, like the lack of choices women had in terms of their level of expression. And so that like really genetically lives within us, this deep fear of being seen. However, I want to posit to you guys kind of as a great experiment that nobody is really responsible for seeing you. I think that part of our fear of being seen is that we weren't well received maybe when we were younger, or we project, which is also a function of Libra, projection. We project onto others that they won't be able to handle, or they won't be able to understand who we are at our most authentic. A lot of us are into things that are considered woo or weird. Many on the priestess path. The priestess is an archetype, or a medicine woman. Really, that archetype lives on the edges of society. Like, they're not fully integrated into society, and so many of us carry that archetype internally. It's like it's encoded into us. It's an authentic to us archetype. And so living out this experience of sort of being the exile, or the edge walker, the one who exists sort of in the thresholds or liminal spaces, we're all into things that are not mainstream, right? And that experience feels it can come with that reality, let's say, can come with the feeling of being rejected or not belonging, right? And I think what we often forget, I've been going through this with my daughter who's an Aquarius, and Aquarius is a sign that I think really well resonates with, well, Scorpionic themes and Aquarian themes overlap in many ways. But there is this sense of the exile. Like Capricorn, we've talked about it pretty consistently, is that consensus reality, civilization, society, the way a civil society is cohesive, energy that coalesces around a central pole. And Aquarians tend to want to kind of buck the system, or to take their energy back from that central pole and invest it in, right, pushing out on the periphery in service to moving humanity forward, right? Like, there's a deep why behind why they're doing this project. And so archetypes of the Aquarian are the exile, the heretic, the hermit, maybe, the progressive, the mad scientist, the revolutionary, people who are the frontiers person, the pioneer person who wants to forge their own path. But when we take that path, we in essence leave our tribe, right? And I think what happens is after a while, we forget that it was our choice to leave. It was our choice to go. And so we start to feel victimized by that choice, because the outpicturing is one of being exiled, or one of not having belonging, right? And so, we need to remember that there is, in essence, a cross to bear, when we've chosen to step into our medicine. or when, and by choice, I mean, it's not always a conscious choice. Sometimes it's a choice the soul made, a contract the soul made before in, incarnating in this lifetime, right? And so there is sort of a cross to bear. It's a cross of, loneliness sometimes, or not belonging. And depending on, how the psyche is constellated, that sense of not belonging can be deeply hurtful. If there's a forgetting around the sovereign choice to have taken that path, it can be deeply hurtful. I mean, and we can have traumatic experiences around not belonging. And one of the shadow sides of Libra is is people pleasing, right? Trying to get belonging, but in a way that's almost manipulative. There's the people pleaser, can just be one of the most dangerous people, right? The deeply, and this isn't even like, there's a shadow of codependency in Libra as well, but I think people pleasing and codependency are two distinct things that we just find that consistently overlap, but they're distinctly different. The people pleaser feels powerless, and they are looking to be mirrored, which is a function of Libra, mirroring projection. They are looking to be mirrored and validated by others, right? Through their act of people pleasing. But when you're people pleasing, there's an expectation that you're going to get that mirroring and validation back. And so that's manipulative because there's a get energy inside of it. And when you don't get that back, the level of projection, there can be like, the snapback or the response of the person who is a people pleaser. It can be very violent in the sense that, they can project, you know, harm, like you've harmed me, the way that they feel victimized, like you don't apologize. It's a way of trying to control the situation so that they're still validated, right? So they didn't get the initial validation, and so they use a lot of manipulative tendencies like guilt tripping or going into their own kind of sense of victimization and then blaming the other person for the fact that they feel victimized, and then asking the other person to kind of carry that karmic load for them, which karma, again, is also a part of the Libra mystery school. If you work with me long enough, you get to learn that the Libra mystery school, the temple, right, of Libra, is one of the most intense because it deals with such powerful themes around what it means to be human and to get our needs met, right? This weighing of the scales, this idea of justice. It is this karmic balancing that's constantly taking place. And like, how do we navigate the world as a hall of mirrors through the use of projection, which projection in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's how the psyche maps the world, right? Like we are all constantly projecting. Projecting is like a foretelling in a way. The act of mirroring is part of Libra. And so, we're creating some really gnarly karma when we're inside of these people-pleasing tendencies. And part of why I'm bringing this up is because so many of us will be seeing family this week, and it's an opportunity to really gauge, how authentic we can be, um, whether or not we are betraying or abandoning ourselves and shape shifting into more pleasing templates so that other people can swallow us, or for other people's level of comfort, for our own level of comfort. And what is the edge between people pleasing, meaning you're changing yourself for the comfort of somebody else to please them, versus actual protection, like self-protection, where it's like, I already know in this scenario, I won't be received if I come in this way. And so I am going to consciously don a cloak of protection so that I can kind of make it through this meal or this day in a way where I feel peaceful and I'm not betraying myself by doing this. I'm honoring myself, right? It really, really comes down to our own level of consciousness. You know, one of the exercises I did not too long ago was just like looking at all of the places where I feel fear around being fully self-expressed and being fully in my authenticity. And I've got to be honest, one of the last places like in real life, you've got like your in real life and then you've got your online life, right? I feel like everyone's bifurcated into these two groups. And so we all know we sort of have them. In my in real life side of the pool, it is with my dad. That's kind of my last frontier where I still notice that like I want him to be pleased by me. He was a very critical parent growing up, and I kind of morph into this person I almost don't recognize when I hang out with him. I'm aware of it, I'm conscious of it, and I'm working on it, right? Like I just want him to be happy with me, right? I feel the sting of his disappointment so deeply, and it's not so much about pleasing him. It's about protecting myself from the sting of his inevitable disappointment if I show up in a particular way, right? It's a whole conglomeration or not, or a web of, you know, shadow that I have to look at. But everywhere else in my in real life world, I can be fully self-expressed. I'm very, very blessed that I have a family. So my parents are divorced, and so my mom and then my kids and everyone on my mom's side of the family, I don't care, right? Like if they don't like me or if they don't like something I have to say, I don't have to abandon myself at all. Every once in a while I ruffle feathers, but I've noticed that I just don't care. Like I really can leave them to deal with themselves if something I've said or done ruffles their feathers. Like that is actually theirs to deal with. It's not mine to caretake for them. Unless I create a mess through being hateful, or if I go unconscious and get angry and say something really sloppy or really rude or uncalled for that feels outside of my own integrity, I'll go clean up a mess. But if we're talking like politics and there's a disagreement and it bothers them that I think a particular way, I can really let them deal with it. I'm able to really sit in the seat of my sovereignty. And the same goes with my friends. I feel like in real life, I'm thousands of times more self-expressed than I am like out on the internet. And I think a lot of people are the inverse of that, like where they feel like they can be anonymous on the internet. And so there's this way that they maybe are more fully self-expressed on the internet, and then in real life is where they have the issues. I think I feel that witch wound activated much more when I'm online. And online is a beautiful place to practice. I took a course with my own teacher called Slay, and she really talked about how using the internet is a beautiful place, like way to practice, right? And so one of the tenets on the Venus path is that all of the work that we're doing is experimental and playful, right? If we go at it like it's really serious, it's much more difficult, like if we take it too seriously. So I go into like the internet stuff and I'm like, okay, I'm going to play with saying this, and it's a really high sensation, and I'm going to see how it feels to hold the sensation in my body. And I'm going to see if I get, if it's so high sensation, like what is the point in which I stop being able to back what I've said, right? And when we're working through the Venus path, we're on the ascent side, so we've come up through the root chakra, which is fear, and fears around survival, right? And then above that is the womb, which is really around the womb chakra, around havingness and our ability to try lots of different things, to have adventures, and like really just how much can we have? How much can we hold? Whatever it is. How much experience, how much sensation. And then the solar plexus is really, and there's a part of the womb chakra also that informs us of our desires, right? What we really truly desire in this world. And it is through having a plethora of adventures and experiences that we tap into what we desire. And then the solar plexus is about backing that, like the capacity to back all of the things that are unique to us, our desires, the erotic kind of, life-giving experiences that we want to have. And authenticity is in everyone's bag of things that they want to have. We all want to be able to be authentic, and we all want to be well received. And we all want, if we're not well received, to be able to hold ourselves through that experience. And so sometimes when I'm online, something very high sensation will happen, and I'm really gauging like what is my capacity to back what I've said and to hold myself through how bad it feels to have people coming at me. And I just had a wonderful like little experience with that um on election day before we knew the results. I had made this post that said, you know, despite politics, despite our history, and we all know America's history and connection to slavery and genocide and all this other stuff. So I was acknowledging um, the sins of our past, right? And I was saying, despite the politics, America's still the greatest nation in the world, and I am so proud to be an American. And there's a lot of things that I've experienced in my life that have brought me to that opinion. It's just an opinion, right? I wasn't asserting it as any kind of fact. If somebody who was Australian said Australia is the greatest country in the world, I would never dream to like get on their post and be like, no, it's not. I would think this is an Australian who's proud to be Australian, and it felt like a go team post for me. And I posted it in that spirit of unity. Like, let's not forget that despite our differences or whatever the outcome of the election is today, we're still a great nation. And we can still be proud of this country. Country is so much more than the politics or the government or who's in charge. There's been thousands upon thousands of politicians over the years in America. It's like the spirit of the people and the spirit of the land, and even the rich history that includes the Native Americans and the immensely rich gifts that they have given us. I really believe, I know this is kind of a side tangent, but I really believe that like, and I believe this because I'm a world traveler. I've been to many different countries all around the world. I have lived in Israel, which is a place that has seen so much bloodshed. That land itself is karmic, and you can feel, if you're intuitive or sensitive, to place, you can feel that on the land when you travel. Like when you travel through Europe, you can feel that the land is like dense. There's the energy of like the dark father in places in Europe. And in Israel, you can feel the history alive. It's animate in the land. But when you come to America, there's this way that a lot of the land here feels very fresh, very new, very kind of like blank canvas in a way. And I really believe that is thanks to the ritual purification and cleansing that the natives did for this space. And I wish that was something that we could honor more deeply. I wish there was a way that we could integrate and understand the connection to the land through their lens and have that integrated in a mainstream way. But anyways, that's my side tangent. But part of why I think this is the greatest country in the world is because I have lived in a lot of other places. And so part of it is the land, but part of it is the level of freedom that we have. And we have a level of freedom here that protects us from the government that a lot of other places don't. And my husband is an immigrant who is from Palestine. And despite what is happening in Palestine and even America's support of Israel, still deeply loves and appreciates this country and deeply feels like this is the greatest place in the world. So now that I've said my side tangent, I posted, it was like a tile, it was like 2 or 3 sentences long. And I got a lot of people who were angry that I said that, that I can't say that. It's harmful. Saying the greatest is kind of violence. And it was so ridiculous to me. Not because I don't have the capacity to acknowledge that there has been egregious harms to people done through the American project, but because their comments were meant to negate my experience and my opinion. It was just an opinion, right? And they came at me with that like death mother annihilatory energy. And so I was like, oh, here we go. I get an opportunity to practice. Hadn't expected that was going to happen. It felt like a rather benign post to me. I thought I have a great group of people in community on Facebook. They all know my heart. I'm not somebody who walks around spewing wild, offensive opinions all the time. And so never occurred to me that this was going to be a controversial thing to say. And there was a woman who called me a white supremacist and like would not stop, despite like trying to have a conversation with her. So I ended up blocking her. But my greater point was I was able to hold myself through it and continue to back myself. And one woman, she unfriended me, which was sad to me. She's not American. She's native, but I think from Canada. And even though I did support and liked her comments, even though her comment was a negation of mine, I still I could see it from her point of view. I could understand why for her this didn't ring true. And so I liked her comment, but she, was demanding that I take responsibility for what I said. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't take responsibility for your hurt. It's not possible. If you read this and projected whatever, your beliefs, your opinions, whatever lives in your psyche onto my post and made it mean something that it didn't mean, I can't actually take responsibility for that, right? And I acknowledge and I get that you're angry. And if this is something that is worth disconnection for you, I understand that. But I'm not going to censor myself, right? And I was very proud of how I held that because I was able to hold her experience. I was able to love her and see her inside of her experience and to honor that her choice was she didn't want to be connected with me anymore if I wasn't going to take responsibility for the harm that I caused through my post, right? And so, in the sort of coming back to this heart chakra and the authenticity and how the the chakras play into each other, there were moments that got very high sensation and right that taps into the wound of the root chakra, that survival, that am I going to be canceled, am I going to be annihilated, survival fear. But then there's also a shadow of the death mother in the solar plexus because that is our inner sun, it's our inner radiance. And so to not have somebody acknowledge our inner radiance, right? To project darkness onto our radiance, to project danger, right, onto our inner radiance, to make us out like a villain or a demon. They demonized us. Um, there's a death mother shadow there that we can either agree with, like if I had collapsed in that moment and been like, oh, you're right, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said it. I'll take responsibility for how you're feeling and how you understood the post. Um, yeah, there's this way, it's almost like I'm agreeing that I deserved to be unfriended or to be exiled or to lose belonging. And I actually don't think I did. I honor her choice to do that, but I don't think I deserved it. I don't think that I'm any less of a person. I don't know if I could have handled that differently. It's something I've sat with, to like save the connection. But at the end of the day, I think I'm very happy with how I did handle it. And going into this week with our loved ones, we really have to be able to walk all of the edges. And so my invitation is to be conscious around yourself, and where you are backing your expression, where you're allowing somebody else to dominate your expression, or where it's actually a wisdom path, right? Venus right now is in Capricorn, and Capricorn, one of the archetypes she takes on is the crone, and this kind of connection to the circle of grandmothers ancestrally, right? And there's just a beautiful kind of wisdom around just knowing when it's not important. Like it's not important to talk. It's not important to shove our expression down somebody else's throat. It's not important that they validate us. We can validate ourselves. It's not important that they see us. There's almost an immaturity in a way, in some instances, when we demand to be seen, when we demand that other people do the work of validating us, right? When we can't mirror for ourselves that we're okay and we need other people to do that for us. And so just inviting you guys to remain conscious over the holidays, and allow yourself to experiment with all of these different edges, right? Like where um where do I perceive that I've been exiled or lost belonging, but I've actually been the one who took myself out, right? And so it was a sovereign choice. And so where do I feel victimized by that choice? That's a big one. Where am I people pleasing, right? For their comfort? Where am I able to back my expression? And where is it not important that I back my expression, right? Where am I wearing a mask? And look, I think the masks are important for they help us conserve energy, right? So if we've got like a really bigoted, bombastic uncle, right, who's never going to hear anything we say because his opinions are so set in stone, like, is it okay to just sort of wear a more generic mask around him to peacefully get through dinner? I mean, in a world that says, no, we always have to be authentic, always, 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 I'm saying or giving you permission to, as long as you're conscious that you're like, no, you know what, for the sake of harmony and balance, I'm just not going to go there with that guy. I'm going to conserve my energy. My energy is more precious to me. I'm going to take the wisdom path of cloaking or veiling or protection here, and just giving yourself permission for that to be okay, right? So I don't want to drown on. The other thing I'd love for you guys to do, because I think it was a really helpful exercise for me, is to be an inquiry around um, where you feel like you can be self-expressed without a lot of effort and it's easy to back yourself, and where it feels challenging to you. For me, the internet was really challenging. It was a really challenging place to put myself out there and allow myself to be seen in my gifts. And it's interesting because one of the wounds that we deal with on the Venus path is the wound of love. And it's this idea that like some of the fears that we have are actually that our gifts are going to be acknowledged. We're going to be loved because of our gifts. We're going to get accolades. We're going to be seen in our unique expression of our gifts. And that love is painful. It kind of depends on how we're templated as children. If there was a scarcity of love and there wasn't a lot of validation and there wasn't a lot of support and encouragement around our gifts, it can almost feel painful to be seen in our gifts. And in the authentic expression of that. And so even just tracking that edge, like, when I'm big and it's on and it's beautiful, how uncomfortable is it for me to be seen there? It's an inquiry, right? So bringing these inquiries in, allowing yourself to just stay conscious, see how conscious you can stay as you navigate this week. Play it like a game, do it like an experiment. See, are there certain family members that you can really be yourself around? Are there certain family members that you can never be yourself around? What is it? Like, what is the thing? Is it like with my dad, it is definitely, I think, in the realm of pleasing him, right? Like there's no real danger. And his type of criticism isn't like he doesn't like throw daggers or shoot barbs into me. He'll kind of more like roll his eyes. It's still hurtful. There's this inner child part of me that just wants to be daddy's little girl, that just wants to be loved by him. And so like there's this young part of me um, that is interacting with my dad that needs like to grow up. So I'm working on it, right? And so paying attention to those types of things, I think this can be a really great week to dig for treasure around um, this tension between authenticity and belonging, and seeing, the different places where you're at along this spectrum. All right, loves. That was all I wanted to say. Take care. I hope you have a great week, and please come back on and let us know how it went.